Welcome back to Geek Leak. I'm your host, Brandon Conn, and this is On Brand with Brandon Conn. On March 18th, DC Comics tweeted that the actor who portrayed Pattinson's Batman, aka Batman's Riddler, Paul Dano, will be writing a Riddler comic book. Very little information is known about the comic as far as plot goes, but this is the actor who put a cork in the butt of Daniel Radcliffe's corpse, so I think we can look forward to something at least mildly interesting. The comic is set to launch in October. Chris Pine, in a People magazine article, has compared the Dungeons & Dragons movie, premiering March 3rd, 2023, to The Goonies. He also stated it's heartfelt with Game of Thrones and A Little Princess Bride with just a smidge of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. A couple things here. One, all those movies and shows are entirely different from one another, with the exception that they have swords, maybe some magic. That's like me saying that this show is The Daily Show with Jon Stewart with a dash of Stephen Colbert and a sneeze of G4. Would it be cool? Sure. But anyone tuning in is probably going in with severely lower expectations than that. Although I will say, as far as comparing The Princess Bride and Game of Thrones, they both did have weddings. They both had marriage. The other thing is, if what Chris Pine is saying is true, then this is nothing like D&D. Tell you what, I'll believe it's D&D when they report that 3 actors have been switched out because of scheduling issues, and the director quits halfway through because they got bored of their own story. Hey audience, do you play Magic the Gathering? Don't you love it when you get mana and can't play over half your cards? Well, there's good news for you. Magic has released a new feature, Improvise. Improvise is where, instead of tapping mana, you can tap artifacts for colorless mana. Because of reasons. This also just in, Magic literally can't stop adding dumbass features to cards, and it's becoming a real hassle to remember what everything does. Eventually you're going to need to be a damn paralegal to actually be able to referee or play. What's that, Billy? You want to play a game? Here, let me set up my first 3 spells, and then wait half an hour for you to read all the features and figure out if they have any bearing at all on how you play the cards in your hand. You know, Magic used to have a couple of features like returning spells to one's hand, imprint, regenerate, or literally just being a wall. That was a feature. Being a wall was a feature. And sure, you had some strategies you could use to build a deck, but otherwise you could play very casually as if it was a poker game with friends. Now you can't just sidle up with a starter deck and expect to just be able to hobnob at the game shop for more than 5 minutes before you get stomped by someone who spent hundreds of dollars building a deck out of cards that most likely will be made illegal next year anyway. Netflix has announced it will continue to release new seasons of their adult animated shows, Inside Job, Big Mouth, and Love, Death, and Robots. That's right, Geek Leakers. We all can look forward to Lady Rick and Morty, Uncomfortably Sexual 12-Year-Olds, and The Animation Show, only not hosted by Don Hertzfeldt. Come on, Don Hertzfeldt? Rejected Cartoons? You guys remember that? And it was only out in 2000. I am a banana.
God's multiple chins cause your own.
While we avoid our feelings of existential dread coupled with our fear of mortality, let's go ahead and go to our anime and manga segment. We wound up, woo. Short and sweet and to the point. I'll live with that. So, some of you may have noticed, and if you didn't, then this is why we sleep in separate beds. Because you don't pay attention to me. You don't. Oh, I can't stay mad at you, audience. Anyway, you may have noticed that I wear a good bit of Junji Ito gear, and that's because I've been a longtime fan of his for a long while. So long that it wasn't until I started getting excited over even seeing his merchandise for sale did I find out about the anime adaptation of his works. The consensus by most fans of his was roughly the same. I myself could barely make it through 2 or 3 episodes of the selected works of his. Don't worry, I'm not going to elaborate why, but I just need to say this one thing. It's just that
11 minutes later.
And what the fuck even was that scene? Ito-sama, you are meant to be my spicy, scary manga daddy, and I won't rest until... Oh. Sorry. I think, lost my composure for a minute there. Got on a tangent, you see. Anyway, you can understand then that I had a good bit of skepticism for the newest adaptation, but just take a look. Pretty damn awesome looking, right? It's one of many impressive moves that Toonami has been making as of recently, including announcing a new season of Fooly Cooly and a completely original series called Housing Complex C. Really, I don't think Toonami or Cartoon Network in general get enough credit for what they have done for animation. I feel that a lot of American anime fans owe their discovery to Toonami. In the late 90s and most of the 2000s, the only places you could realistically and organically find anime anywhere was in specialty video shops, Sam Goody, Suncoast, that kid that ate alone at lunch. You know, the kids, the ones that did the Naruto run through the hallways. You remember them. But do you, not a whole lot of judgment, a little bit of judgment. Anyway, but what I'm basically saying was it was slim pickings back then. Toonami introduced a whole generation to action and mech animes, as well as some less action-packed shows like Tenchi Muyo, and Adult Swim brought in late-night lineups with more, adult-oriented animes, like Paranoid Agent, Cowboy Bebop, and Samurai Champloo. So, I for one will be watching eagerly for both the Uzumaki anime as well as the Housing Complex C, because if anyone has built up credibility in the weeb fandom, it's Toonami. Now, we are covering our tech and gaming segment, Connection. Continuing along the vein of horror from the last segment, 2K and Supermassive Games announced on March 17th that they will be releasing a horror-themed game called The Quarry. The release is to be determined, but is supposed to be sometime this summer. As someone who played the horror-themed game Until Dawn, I can't wait to play this game once and then forget it exists. You know, like most other generic modern slasher movies. But let's talk about something far more terrifying and sinister. Travel expenses. I'm talking about Konami announcing on March 15th an indie gaming convention to be hosted in Japan called Indie Games Connect 2022. For indie games, you know, the games made by amateurs who most likely don't have the time or money to fly to Japan. The convention will be said to have an indie games exhibition, game development consultation, and a seminar, all for free, except, the travel and lodgings, for which the ticket alone at cheapest is around $1,600. The whole convention will also be sponsored by Sony Interactive Entertainment, publishing company Shueisha, and Unity Technologies. So, go to this convention if you have nearly $2,000 to burn and probably want your creative team to be poached by huge companies that may just opt to steal your game anyway. Publisher Skybound Games and developer Mega Cat Studios have announced for the PS5, PS4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, and PC a wrestling RPG called WrestleQuest. And really, even though the release date hasn't been announced yet, just from first look, this doesn't look like it's going to be very good, or even half of what it honestly could be. It looks every bit like whoever conceptualized this game has never really watched wrestling, nor has any idea what kind of lives wrestlers lead. And to be honest, if that was properly harnessed, it could have made for a better game. Wrestling has a fantasy element to it that all viewers indulge in, including the fantasy that some of them didn't die, because that's inconvenient for Vince McMahon. There are wrestlers whose characters are undead, characters who are said to be mentally insane people who talk to socks, dress up as an old Western outlaw, a ladies' man, hippie, and that's just McFoley. There's wrestlers who pretend that cocaine gives them the power to transcend their corporeal body. There's plenty of fantasy in wrestling. That's my point. But this doesn't even look fun. Even more confusing, you apparently will encounter lizards, robots, and action figure fighters. You guys remember that famous scene from the Oscar-winning movie The Wrestler, right? Where, that one guy fought a bunch of lizards and robots? WWE, I think you just need to stick with re-releasing the same video game every year. That's about what you got. But as for us, that's it for Geek Leak this week. Be sure to like and subscribe to our different content across our platforms. Also, I'm going to start streaming on Twitch as I have time or when I can figure out a schedule, so feel free to drop in and watch with my handle, Geek Leak News. Yep, still, working on that. Trying anyway. I'm Brandon Conn, and Thunder, Thundercats, ho!